Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen fairy tale finales, cosmic escapades, and a recontextualized US history. But we're going to kick things off this week with Blood Squad 7, number 4, written by Joe Casey with artwork by Paul Fry. So this kind of puts a bow on what seems to be the first arc of Blood Squad 7, and I gotta say, I've been really entertained by the notion of this book. Its 90s excess and extremes, the way that we got from Rob Liefeld with Youngblood way back in the day. But I love how this book is really kind of putting it under a microscope and looking at the 90s through the lens of what we know about comics and what we love about comics right here and right now. Joe Casey's doing a really good job at keeping this entertaining while also leaning into those notions that we kind of grew up with and kind of playing with that nostalgia. But I think what this book really does best is kind of creating the characters that see beyond the veil, right? Or kind of work behind the scenes from our superheroes and the way that they're kind of navigating this world and how they're steering our superheroes in this world. Really fun, entertaining things that are going on here. And I think it's a really successful way of taking the notion of Youngblood and kind of pushing it forward into the 21st century. I think that Joe Casey and Paul Fry are doing fantastic work here, and I think it's totally worthwhile. And with our next issue, let's talk Briar number 8, written by Chris Cantwell with artwork by Alex Linz. So this is the ending of another arc here, and I think that this book is doing a lot of fun things, being that it's kind of the notions of a fairy tale. The main character being Briar Rose, the Sleeping Beauty. I love how they're kind of playing with the anticipations and kind of subverting our expectations with all of these characters and all the things that are happening. I was also very pleased to see that where this book ends leaves us on a cliffhanger. We don't really know whether or not this was going to be the end of the series or an end to the arc, and it very much feels like this is the end to an arc, albeit we don't know when the book is going to be coming back yet. Chris Cantwell, he's crafting a really fun story here. I really like how he's playing with these characters, and now, especially as the team has been reunited now, we kind of saw in the first arc a team develop to kind of go after the evil of the fairy godmothers. We saw the team get pulled apart and kind of, they get frayed basically of seeing that maybe Briar is the curse as opposed to her being the hero of the story. And now they've come back here. They're ready to take on the villainous fairy godmothers. And, it's like I said, it's playing on those tropes. It's playing on those expectations here in a really wonderful ways. But being that this is a fairy tale, it's also keeping it fun and light, even though there are some dark and dastardly things that are going on. So, Briar number 8, really successful end to the second arc. Next up, let's talk Conan the Barbarian number 14, written by Jim Zub with artwork by Doug Braithwaite. I love how Conan just keeps developing and growing into this like just fantastic comic book that I didn't think that I would be along for the ride for 14 issues, but it continues to be one of the best comics on stands right now. This issue in particular, it's really fun because we kind of get this outside perspective. We've lived in Conan's head and kind of followed him along on his journeys. But now in this issue, we kind of get the entire issue through the eyes of an onlooker as Conan, travels north and he's kind of in this snowy landscape and he's with a completely different world than the barbarians or the Sumerians that he's normally with. It gives him a different outlook on things, a different approach, and they kind of see his approach in a different way as well. But it's all kind of through the viewpoint of this one character who's watching all of this kind of play out. We get our fun adventure, we get our fun action beats and everything like that. But I love kind of seeing how others in this world interpret Conan because in a way he's a very honorable character. He has his moral code and he has his standards, but I love how it plays with the notion of those things along with the fact that he does very dishonorable things. He works with thieves, he works with killers, he is a barbarian himself, but he sets that standard and he sets that code, and it's so wonderful seeing that from the aspect of another person. Doug Braithwaite's artwork on this, again, it's such a great juxtaposition to what we see with Roberto Della Torre when he's drawing those classic stories, and being that this is taking place in the past as Conan is kind of finding his way and kind of developing into the character that we know and love later on stories. I love the fact that the artwork kind of slightly changes. It gives us a different perspective, a different take on the character that we don't get from the other side of the story. So again, I think it's a good visual change that is worthwhile with the artistic change. So Conan the Barbarian continues to be a fantastic book on stands here, and this one was no exception. Okay, let's talk Crocodile Black #4, written by Philip Kennedy Johnson with artwork by Samnath Pal. So I'll be honest here, if I only ever read issue #1 of this series, I probably would not be very pleased with how things finalized, right? It was a really slow burn, it left a lot of things on the plate, but the series as a whole has gotten better and better and better with each and every issue. And #4 in particular starts to unravel some of the mysteries that I feel like we definitely needed, especially with our main character being that he's an enigma. We don't know kind of why he's going through this path. You know, in previous reviews, I've said that we don't know whether to root for him or not, and we still kind of don't. But we understand so much more about Danny as a character because we're starting to see some of the things that have happened in the past and why his family is unraveled and why the trust that he's built, has really deteriorated within his family. And we know he's also been dealing with medical conditions that have kind of led him down this path to start taking on the persona of this killer that he stumbled upon and taken the crocodile boots, which are the namesake of the actual story itself. So the story is unraveling a little bit. It's starting to deliver on those mysteries here. We're starting to understand more. And in that understanding, the story has become so much more enriched and so much more full. And it's made it really a worthwhile story. I'm so glad that I didn't drop this on issue 1 because, again, it just continues to get better and better and better. I'm really interested to see how they wrap up this story because the walls are now closing in on our main character. There's not a lot of avenues that he's going to be able to take to get out of this, but I'm very curious to see how they unravel the final mystery as to what the heck can he do to really make things right in all the wrongs that have happened in the past. So if you're reading Crocodile Black, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And next up, let's talk Daredevil, The Woman Without Fear, #2, written by Erica Schultz with artwork by Michael Dowling. So this mini series, I should say, continues to surprise me as I didn't have high expectations for it. Issue 1 totally blew me away. Issue 2 stays very, very good, albeit I feel like there's a couple, I don't know, I don't want to say missteps, but fine tuning that can happen. This continues to see Elektra as she's now tracking down Alice, her kind of ward, if you'd say, that she developed and kind of, and picked up in the King in Black part of the Zdarsky run of Daredevil. And I'm so glad that they picked up the threads of that story, as I feel like it was such an interesting notion that you could take on with the character, being that Elektra has changed so much. And I think that's what Erica Schultz is really doing so well in this series, is that she's taking those changes and really running with them, albeit the fine tuning I spoke to. I think that's where we could have, played with those notions a little bit more here, as Elektra, I don't want to say she seems out of character, but it seems like she's so bought into the persona of Daredevil and being a hero that we're losing the fact that, for the majority of this character's history, she's been an assassin and she's killed for fun. And they mention that, but I feel like there could be a little bit more of a struggle or a little bit more of her, I don't know, leaning into those old ways, in comparison to, her being a hero as well. I want to see that struggle a little bit, especially with the fact that she's taking on both Crossbones and the new Punisher in this. These are both murderous characters. That could have been played with a little bit more here. But I gotta say, I've read a couple different Erica Schultz books now from Marvel, and it feels like they're maybe grooming her to be maybe one of the next big writers, the same way that they did with Jed MacKay. So I'm encouraged to see her continue to put out good work, just like with this issue. The other thing, Michael Dowling's artwork continues to be really fantastic. It's gritty, it's textured. I would like a little bit more kinetic energy along with it, but it also feels very much in vein of what a Daredevil book should be. I love the fact that when it gets, just dirty and noir like that. It's really good visuals. It's so fitting for this book here. So I hope that they keep this up. I hope that this team stays a pairing here even after this mini series is over, because I think they could do really fantastic work down the road as well. And next up from the horror imprint EC from Oni, let's talk Epitaphs from the Abyss #2, with a variety of artists and a variety of writers here. I gotta say, I was pretty darn disappointed by this issue. I had really high hopes and I loved issue 1. And issue 2 just feels so out of sorts, right? Like it kind of doesn't lean into the horror vibes that I got from issue #1 as it should, being that this is the horror imprint. This is EC Comics. But everything kind of just felt mundane. Like there were some playful things that are happening, but the Matt Kint story just didn't feel, again, horror enough for me. Same thing with the Jason Aaron story. Like there were some aspects that we're playing with, but like overall, this issue just didn't hit home for me. Jorge Fornia's on artwork, I think, was a high point in this issue, albeit it's not like the best Jorge Fornia's artwork that I've seen from him. And overall, again, like I hate to compare one issue to the next, but I kind of have to, considering that issue 1 really felt like it hit high marks for me. Issue 2, without issue 1, I would almost say that this is somewhat skippable. So I don't know. It's an anthology series, so there's going to be hits and misses, peaks and valleys. This was definitely a valley for me, but I'm going to stick around. I'm going to see kind of how things progress here, because with anthologies, they can just kind of skyrocket right back up here. So let's cross our fingers here for issue #3. And with our next book, let's talk Namor #2, written by Jason Aaron with artwork by Paul Davidson and Alex Linz. I struggled through issue #1. Looking back, I didn't really enjoy what they were doing with the book. It kind of left a lot of question marks. We don't know why Namor was in prison. We don't know why he was so down on himself. And issue #2, we start to pick up some of that. We're not necessarily putting pieces of the puzzle together, but we're looking through Namor's history and we're starting to see some of the things that happened in his past as he finally has escaped from prison and he's back in Atlantis, not to take the crown back necessarily, but to definitely challenge King Atuma for the rights to the crown here, because there's definitely war that's about to ensue amongst all of the underwater civilizations. I think that there's some successful things. This was a way more enjoyable issue than issue #1 was for me. However, it didn't do enough to keep its hooks in me whatsoever. I like some of the notions of how Namor became Namor himself, but I don't know that we needed to know that. I don't think that there's enough meat on that bone to make me really interested to know, oh, that's why he's such a headstrong character. Like I kind of just appreciated that, Imperious Rex, go get him. Like, that's just the character. That's just inherent in his nature. There are some things that are being played with in regard to a previous, love interest per se from his childhood that kind of comes back. There's some different notions about, how he was treated as a being of two worlds. But again, I don't know. It's just not really doing it for me right now. The nature of there being two artists on this book, I think that they at least dealt with that successfully, with Paul Davidson taking on the things that are happening in current day and Alex Linz taking on the past events from Namor's history. I like the way they play with that, but also I know Marvel, and I know that that usually means that there's an artistic delay. So I don't know if that was built in or if this was something that they did just to make sure that the book stayed on schedule. Either way, the book kind of fell flat for me. It didn't really keep me interested. I do think it was an improvement, but not enough for me to continue to pick up this book week over week. All right, let's talk Phoenix #2, written by Stephanie Phillips with artwork by Alessandro Miracolo. Just like issue #1, this really surprised me, and it's kind of setting itself up to be what might be my favorite book of the new X line relaunch that they're doing. This is just a fun cosmic book, and I like the way that Stephanie Phillips is portraying Jean almost as like a separate entity from the Phoenix itself. They are the two that are one, but I like the way that they play with that notion. The artwork in this is fantastic. I think that they have actually fixed some of the gripes that I had with issue #1, which was primarily with the coloring, being that it was just orange upon orange over orange, and it kind of just muddied the waters of everything that was happening in the book. This, I feel like, is a little bit of a course correction. Being that it's Phoenix, we still got orange. There's got to be fire on the page, right? But I like the way that they play that against some of the deep purples that you get in some of these pages here, especially when she's protecting Corsair from, from space itself. It's a fun issue, especially when you're playing with a character like Corsair, the swashbuckling space pirate. The one thing I didn't necessarily like is I feel like they almost pushed aside all of the character development that happened in the previous run of X-Men, where Scott and Corsair had reconciled a lot of their differences, right? And they were really bonding as a family. And this almost looks completely past that, and it shows them butting heads again and showing, oh, I don't trust my father. He was never there for me as a child. It's like, we kind of got past that, and I liked the family aspect. I like the Summers as a family as a whole, right? They should be bonded and they should get together. Should they butt heads? Sure. But should you totally bypass the development that's happened? No, that rubbed me the wrong way. But the issue overall, I like how they're developing the villain of the character. I like how they're developing Jean as a solo character. I think she can really be successful as a solo character moving forward. I'm excited by the notions of this book. I'm excited about where they're going with it. And again, it continues to be, if not my favorite book of the relaunch, at the very least, it's the most fun book that we've gotten so far. And with a book that completely surprised me this week, let's talk Standstill #1, written by Lee Lowridge with artwork by Andrew Robinson. So I'll be honest, I didn't anticipate reading this, but I had a little bit of room on the pull list, so I figured I would give it a shot. It's a new Image #1, and Lee Lowridge, I feel like his name is everywhere, albeit on coloring duty, so I was kind of enticed to see that. Also, anything Andrew Robinson puts out, I will pick up because his artwork is absolutely fantastic, and this issue is kind of a telltale mark for that. We don't get a lot, but when we get it, it's worthwhile. I loved the artwork of this issue. I love the way that's, everything worked together. There was a little bit of sketchiness along to it with his character work, but everything felt like just a perfect mix of realism and comic book artwork, and I don't mean that in a comic booky superhero comic book way, but just, slightly exaggerated features. Really fantastic work. His panel work is fantastic. His pacing is great. And Lee Lowridge, I haven't read any of his work. I've seen his comic book work from other aspects, but I was pleasantly surprised. I think that this is telling an interesting story. It's laying a foundation. As a standalone, it didn't give me enough to really know exactly what's going on. So, it had its failings there, but I think it gave me enough to make me scratch my head and say, well, maybe I want a little bit more of this. Maybe I want to live in this world just a little bit longer to see what the heck is going on. It all kind of follows this character as he has the ability to stop time, and within that time that he is stopping, he can still take action, move things, do things, and he seems to be almost like a CIA secret agent type of person. But we don't know what the goal is, we don't know what the end game is, and we don't know if he's a hero or a villain of the story. So I'm interested to see how they continue that story. I'm definitely in for the artwork alone, but I think that there's, again, enough meat on the bone here to keep someone interested. So if you read Standstill #1, let me know your thoughts. Next up, let's talk Superman #17, written by Joshua Williamson with artwork by Jamal Campbell. Man, this kind of suffers from tie-in-itis, right? And, that's not either one of the creators' faults on this, whether it be Joshua Williamson or Jamal Campbell. Tie-ins, man, they're either completely necessary or they completely fall flat. And this one kind of leans more towards the falling flat part of it. They do develop on some of the notions that were put in place by Absolute Power, especially with John Kent being under the control of Amanda Waller and Clark, feeling the weight of that, feeling the failure that, has taken place here as a superhero, as a father. But everything kind of just felt a little bit scripted. And I know, kind of like what I just said there doesn't really make a lot of sense, being that it is scripted, it is a comic, but nothing comes off natural. The dialogue doesn't feel natural. The things that take place feel like set pieces, right? As opposed to a natural progression of the story and natural dialogue taking place between the characters. It felt a little bit stilted. it still, it was an okay issue. It had its place, but I feel like it struggled, and those struggles come from the fact that it is a tie-in. It's not telling its story, it's being an ancillary piece of a larger story. And when you're dealing with that, it makes it hard to tell something that is compelling so much as a side piece, right? It's an appetizer, it's not a meal. And that's what they're dealing with here. So Superman number 17, if you read it, let me know your thoughts. Next up, let's talk Ultimate Spider-Man number 8, written by Jonathan Hickman with artwork by Marco Cocchetto. So just like the previous issue, this one, I feel like it's all about planting seeds. Spider-Man, Peter Parker has already teamed up with Harry Osborn. They've kind of started some machinations about taking on some of the villainous people within the Ultimate world now. But now we've been introduced to Tony Stark, and we kind of know what's happening already with the Ultimate books. In the Ultimates book, I should say. Now he's being introduced to these characters. He's being introduced to Ultimate Peter Parker and Ultimate Harry Osborn as well. And we're starting to see some of the things that are gonna play out here in the future, whether it be Harry Osborn, slowly but surely becoming a villain himself. Peter Parker, maybe some aspects of the black suit coming into play. This all of the Ultimate books right now, you know that they're leading to something. So each and every series and each and every issue, I feel like, is all about planting the seeds and kind of just stringing us along just enough to keep us enticed for the end game once the maker actually returns to the Ultimate Universe. So I equal parts appreciate that and kind of despise it a little bit, because I feel like, you're bringing us along for this ride, but is the ride worthwhile? We're not going to really know that until the story is complete. And that's what this really feels like. Now, on the plus side, what I do appreciate is just living in the world with an adult Peter Parker with adult responsibilities and adult problems. The old Parker luck is still there. It's always going to be there, but we get to see a different side, right? And it's the stuff that fans have been clamoring for. It's the thing that we've been asking for. And Marvel, if you're listening, this is kind of the way to do it. If you want to make 616 Peter interesting again, let the past die. Move on. It's time to make this a reality. So if this was your test, consider it a pass. We're all ready for it. The only thing that I will really, really gripe about is that the ending of this issue kind of leaves us with a cliffhanger of what could be the Ultimate Sinister Six. And it felt a little bit hokey. It felt, almost like, the old 60 cartoons, like the Legion of Doom, we're assembling, and, I didn't need that. It felt a little bit too over the top with the way that they're trying to develop and grow this new Ultimate Universe. So I understand, I like the seed that is planting, considering, like I said, we're talking about planting seeds in these issues. That one, maybe you didn't dig that seed deep enough here. I needed a little bit more than just kind of putting it right on the plate for me. So Ultimate Spider-Man number 8, overall a success with little tweaks that needed to happen. All right, next up, let's talk Witchblade number 2, written by Marguerite Bennett with artwork by Giuseppe Cafaro. This book felt like the comic book equivalent to the "boy, that escalated quickly" meme. We pick up with issue number 1, where Sarah Pazzini, our title character, gets the Witchblade. And, it's her first introduction. She kind of lets loose with the powers of the Witchblade to survive a particular incident. And with this issue, I would have anticipated a slow burn a little bit, but nope. We're kind of just like hammering and hammering and hammering home the Witchblade's power and its influence over Sarah. And I gotta say, when they introduced that they were going to relaunch Witchblade, I was really excited over the notion. All the mythos and lore that comes into play with things like the Witchblade, it just seems like something so ripe for reinvention, right? And a new look at how you can interpret all of these things through the scope of, right now, right here in 2024. And I gotta say, I was a little let down, because I feel like this is really just a retread of everything that we got in the 90s. Everything feels a little bit 90s, especially with the over sexualization of our main character. It felt hokey. It felt like a sales tactic. And I don't know, it just didn't sit right with me, to be completely honest. It didn't keep me interested the way that Witchblade had me interested back in, the early 2000s, the late 90s when I was in my teens. It was the right book at that time because it was fun and it was comic booky, but you know, it's Image. We should have bigger ideas than that. We should be exploring cooler things than that to keep, the readers entertained, right? Like, don't be afraid to take daring chances. Don't retread the same thing that you've done in the same book. It just doesn't make sense to me. The other thing too is that if you're going to be exploring the mythos and lore, really explore it. Like, we're introduced to some of these characters, and it's almost like it's leaning on the readers having read the first series of Witchblade and kind of just understanding who these people are and who they are to the world and what's going to be happening, especially with like Kenneth Irons in the background. It just felt like a little bit clunky. It didn't have enough to really reinvent who these characters are and what they were. I feel like there's just so much potential here, and that's what it really boils down to. I feel like this book is a little bit wasted potential. So, am I being down on this because of my own expectations? Probably. I'll own up to that. But really, I just feel like there was just so much more that could be done here. So if you're okay getting kind of a retread of things that you've gotten previously with maybe, new design layouts, new pencils, better overall techniques for coloring and stuff like that, then great, this is the book for you. If you're looking for something new, I have to say this probably isn't going to whet your appetite. All right, I had to jump on the red band craze at Marvel right now, so let's go ahead and talk Wolverine Revenge, #1, written by Jonathan Hickman with artwork by Greg Capullo. So we'll start with the art here because this is Greg Capullo's return to Marvel, his triumphant return, and it's warranted. Man, like flipping through each and every page, regardless of anything that happens in the story, it just feels so inherently Marvel. I did love his work when he was at DC working on the Batman title, but it felt like someone doing an impression of a Marvel book at that time. And I've loved his solo work. I loved his work at Image, particularly on Spawn, considering he had such a long run on that. Um, he takes so much influence from Todd McFarlane, but he's grown so much over the years that it may, his artwork is very wholly Greg Capullo now. And to see him come back to Marvel, man, it was such a breath of fresh air. I loved the artwork on this. It was stunning. It was fantastic. Now, Jonathan Hickman being the writer on this, man, if you took the credit page off of this, I would never anticipate this being a Jonathan Hickman book. When you get that name, you kind of think big, heady ideas, huge things to explore, world breaking ramifications. And we don't get that here. But that's not a bad thing either. This seems very much like a what if story that just isn't branded a what if story. And it's all just about the world has gone to hell. Everyone that Wolverine hates is still alive, and he is going to rectify that problem. That's what this book is about. And I'm on board. I'm sold by that notion because thinking about Greg Capullo crafting pages of Wolverine fighting Sabretooth, Lady Deathstrike, Shiva, anyone that you think of and know of, Omega Red, when it comes to the mythos of Wolverine, that's going to be awesome. You can tell, I feel like this is a checklist of, hey, Greg, what do you want to draw? Dinosaurs? Check. Villains? Check. Wolverine slicing and dicing just about everything in existence? Check. It's got everything for you. This is a fun, action-oriented book. It's not heavy on any of the notions that are going to break continuity or break the world. You're just along for the ride. This is a roller coaster book, so strap in. You're about to have some fun. And with our runner-up pick of the week, let's talk Redcoat #5, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Brian Hitch. This continues to be just such a fun book. But with that fun, now I love how Johns is developing some darkness, right? Some grittiness. Like we're starting to see the terrors of this world. Maybe terrors isn't the right word, but no, you know what? I'm gonna stick with it. There's darkness here, right? And they're starting to play with that. Simon Pure can only be so jovial for so long. When there's true risks at stake here, you can see the tone of this book totally change. And I love the way that they've interwoven that change. Johns is doing something special here. I really feel like the Ghost world, or I'm sorry, the Ghost Machine world is really kind of like becoming some of my favorite comics right now. This being one of them in particular. Brian Hitch's artwork also continues to shine here, albeit I feel like there's little things that are happening here. I think his ink work seemed a little bit rushed here. It felt a little bit thicker than what we normally get with Brian Hitch's artwork, which is very delicate and very precise, albeit it was still very, very good though. Again, this still plays on the fun notions of historical events. Who you think you are getting is not necessarily who you actually get. Just recontextualizing things that you would have learned basically back in history class, back in elementary school, middle school, high school. Really fun stuff that they're playing with, but the stakes continue to grow and get deeper and more enriched. And I can't wait to continue to go through history, kind of seeing what Simon Pure has influenced and how we can recontextualize that as time goes on. It's just such a fantastic book. If you're looking for a fun time in a book, Redcoat is definitely the book for you. And with our top comic of the week, let's talk Black Cloak number 7, written by Kelly Thompson with artwork by Meredith McLaren. What a fantastic reintroduction to this world. We had a little bit of a gap here between the first and the second arc of Black Cloak, but I think that time frame gave us, just enough time to really, I don't know, let that world marinate. Because I'll be honest, the first arc of this book, I really enjoyed it, but it didn't feel special to me. It was very enjoyable, but it was nothing to write home about. But this introduction to this world, right? This beginning to the second arc, it truly did feel like something special. It feels like the first 6 issues of this series crawled so that this beginning could walk. And I can't wait for the series to start to run now. We get our reintroduction to the main character, who is no longer a Black Cloak now, but her partner is basically investigating a new crime that's happened here, and he kind of pulls her back into the fray. And being that she was the catalyst for basically the change that happens in the world, without giving away too many spoilers of the first arc, she's a person that kind of lives now in the shadows, right? She's left her previous life, and she's kind of, she's succeeding in the changes that she manifested. I love how Kelly Thompson is crafting that, how she's kind of letting here's where everyone stands, here's how the world is reacting to those changes, and here's how we're going to draw everyone back into the story for this next mystery to unfold. It's just such a perfect melding of fantasy and sci-fi and detective noir tropes and story beats. I mean, it's truly perfectly working those all together, and they're working together so well. Kelly Thompson is now doing something that I can truly say is special. I loved this issue. Great introduction, great artwork that is so outside the norm of what you would anticipate from getting from a traditional comic book. It's definitely worthwhile. I loved it, and it was worthy of the top comic of the week. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you next week.